All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tiana. I hail from Maryland, specifically Prince George's County Public Schools. I have been a middle school science public school teacher for the past 18 years. And the last 3 to 4 years, I've been privileged enough to work with Project Resource and the Survey team. And I'm going to present to you some of the most recent work that we had on that. How do I move the slide? Is there gotcha. All right, so past success. When we first started out, my focus really was on science teachers. How can we get science teachers to do more project-based learning within their classrooms and use that to introduce planetary science concepts? So we really wanted to let our middle school students know really what NASA was doing specifically within Project Resource and introduce them to career opportunities that they may not know existed. So we developed 3 engineering designs based on science concepts that were tied to Project Resource's mission tasks. We then trained those science teachers on these lesson plans and had them to deliver those lessons within their classroom. Now, after we had some success with that, I started thinking about how I could bring more teachers in because we got a pretty good response from some of the science teachers that we started out with. And then I started thinking, well, science is kind of given that we already do hands-on learning within the science classroom. But I do have a lot of math teachers who, while they come to my classroom and they see all my students doing all the hands-on fun stuff, and then they go back to their classroom and it's not hands-on fun stuff. So they kind of get a little jealous, but it's okay because we're still friends. But then I started to think, okay, how can I really bring in these math teachers and one, get them hands-on in their classroom, but also tie it to planetary science? Because truth be told, research is showing us that math is a gatekeeper, especially when it comes to students of color, right? So when it comes to high school, a lot of our students don't take the AP classes, don't take the higher or the advanced classes in math. When it comes to college, even some of the students of color who choose STEM, they change their major or they drop out because the math, they just can't make it connect. So then I took on the math challenge, if you will, and I started to brainstorm, how can I really support my math teachers and also really get this planetary science to make this connection? So here's my little comic from my science teacher. Yes, science does make math interesting, but also my math teacher, well, math does upgrade science. So we went through that same kind of process. Because I don't teach math, I wasn't, confident enough to just go in and start making math lessons. So I tapped into those people who already had that expertise. I brought in math teachers. I asked them, what are your lowest performing standards? Because I'm not going to just make lessons about planets and about the moon that you're never going to use because I know that you have standards to teach. So when I asked them what their lowest performing standards were, then I got ideas about what type of lessons I might need to develop or to design about ideas in planetary science. So when I brought in my teachers and they said, well, my students struggle with integers, or my students struggle with proportions, right? Or my students struggle with composite figures. So then I went back to our Project Resource and the SMEs of color that we interviewed, and I said, okay, what part of your job has to do with integers? What part of your job has to do with composite figures? And so we were able to make those connections about what scientists are actually doing. Because kids always have the question, when am I ever going to use this? Why do I ever need to know this? But when you can show them that a scientist is actually using these things as part of their job, then it makes more sense to them and it's easier to make the connections. And so that's what we did using a model of convergence education. And so we went through a 4-step process. We wanted to engage the students with a connection, something connecting to their everyday life. We wanted to expose them to a societal issue, experience the science within that planetary science concept, and then employ a specific math skill that math teachers could really get behind. And then we proceeded with a lesson study. So those math teachers gave us the standards. Those standards were used to make the lesson, and then the teachers were trained on those lessons. Now, not only did we train our math teachers on the hands-on engineering design lesson, we also brought in science teachers and trained them on the hands-on engineering design lessons. And what we found is anytime you go into a professional development, especially when you're working with teachers, teachers can be very territorial. Right? They don't like it when people come in to tell them how they're going to do something or how something should be done. So you have to have a certain amount of buy-in. You need to understand, one, where the teacher is coming from, two, what the teacher needs, and three, how can you serve them or help them meet that need. When you can meet all three of those, then you have buy-in, then teachers are more receptive to what you have to offer. And so we took an equitable professional development approach to our trainings with our teachers. We identified their needs, we provided them with resources, but we also respected their identity and didn't attempt to teach them something, but help support them with an opportunity. And so we ended up with 4 engineering design lessons based on 4 different math standards, and this is the training that we had them on. And what we saw was that a transformation was taking place, okay? Math teachers, they knew the math content, but they needed more support with the science content and the engineering design aspect. Science teachers, they were good with the science and the engineering design, but they needed more support with the math standards. So we saw a transformation from teachers who are leaders in their classroom to now learners within the professional development space. And then after those lessons were trained with the teachers and then implemented in the rooms, those teachers wanted to move further. How could I reach more students outside of my classroom? As a teacher, I'm responsible for approximately 120 students on a good year, okay? Those numbers can go up. But then besides my reach of 120, how could I possibly reach almost all of the students within my school? So instead of having or planning full 72-minute lessons, we planned mini lessons and implemented what was called a planetary science STEM night.
3 minutes.
So several different whole schools decided that they would plan an entire evening, 2 hours, where they would invite parents, invite community members, have stations set up, and have those parents or community members rotate through the sessions and have them do the engineering designs. Now, the great thing about this is we're taking the planetary science content and we're using that with those math standards and introducing them to the community. And these 4 guides were a reflection of that work. And then the best thing about it is these sessions were not run by teachers. These sessions were run by students. So students got trained on the mini lessons, and then it was the students who were running those stations with their peers, running those stations for those parents, and running those stations for their community members. These are actually images or artifacts from a elementary school. So these are 5th graders that are running these stations at a Title I school, largely Latinx population. So not only are they talking about volatiles, resources, and sustainability in English, but they're also translating it to their Spanish-speaking parents. And so our implications, this approach can be used to develop instructional materials for students while including teachers in the process. And when engaging in public outreach, you can connect, value, and serve your audience to build relationships and inspire transformation. Thank you.